So, welcome everybody to Clinical Hypnosis Australia. Today I'm talking to Natalia, and Natalia, let me get this right. You are from Everyday Mindset Hypnotherapy in Sydney for anxiety, confidence, and self-trust.
That's
Tell
right.
me more. Tell us how you got into this and what drives your passion to help people with their anxiety issues.
Yeah. So my background is in corporate. I used to work in advertising for many, many years until I finally had the guts to change the career. And here I am in the world of subconscious transformation. And I think anxiety, the ways that have happened, to be fair, it's more accidental, I would say. It's
Mhm.
not that I had the aim to work with anxiety from the beginning when I started on this path. I was probably more leaning towards confidence because that's something that I've encountered when I was leading teams back
Mhm.
in advertising world, where a lot of very gifted, especially women and men, had that feeling like they're not enough. So they really struggled with their careers to really progress or ask for salary increase or even for promotions, maybe change jobs, even like, people who felt like they were stuck in a smaller role than they really were capable of. That was my initial niche.
Mhm.
However, when I did the website and started talking to people, I started attracting more and more people with anxiety, whether they were from corporate, whether it was moms. And at the end, I realized that anxiety is something that actually is probably the most general thing that people suffer these days because of how busy our life is, how so much information is thrown at us. And to be fair, when you're in a corporate world as well, dealing with deadlines, dealing with pressure from, whether it is from your boss, whether it's from your colleagues, from the client that you work with, more and more people are kind of like in that, stress loop that
Yeah, yeah.
eventually just leads them to feeling that anxious.
Mhm.
And that's just how it happens. So I kind of started on that path. And as I started working with more and more people who had different types of anxiety as well, so whether it's like a social anxiety, whether it's a work anxiety,
Yeah.
whether it's anxiety around speaking, especially in meetings,
Oh, good
people who
point.
kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, people who keep themselves quiet, even though the best thing you can do is, that's the best way to be noticed. And unless you're noticed in that work environment, how can you really build a career, right? So it becomes harder. So yeah, that's sort of like that's what happened.
Yeah. So based on your experience, uh, is it a representation that perhaps people are not advancing in their careers because this anxiety is holding them back because
Yeah,
they feel they can't speak or something?
yeah, that's right. So they're not advancing for different reasons, but one of them is indeed when they don't allow themselves to be themselves, right? Or when they are really hardworking and they are kind of almost like trying to prove themselves through doing that hard work, but at the end, what they end up doing is burning out. Um,
Yes.
and then, they come home and they can't switch off because their mind is still ongoing. And then at some point, especially I notice when people are in mid 30s, for instance, especially women in mid 30s, if they spend most of their life building careers, sometimes they come home and they start questioning their decisions because it feels like there's only job and there is no personal life. There is nothing. And I think because when we obviously get older as well, like in the 20s, it seems fine to sacrifice yourself for building career, for achieving something. And then once you're going to get to the older age, when you get, after 30, you all of a sudden start thinking, hold on a second, is this really what I wanted? What else do I have in my life? And
Do you,
obviously 40s have
do you
different
find
kind of.
sometimes that people come to you because they have compounded anxiety? So not only from work, but
Mhm.
to change work and then having to deal with family issues because they just don't have the energy because of work. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, anxiety has a huge impact as well on relationships,
Yeah.
which we sometimes don't really realize that it does, because there's also like there is a type of anxiety that we already know, right? When you're kind of that we speak about when maybe like you feel that sort of worry in your chest, or if you're about to speak, your heart is pumping up, your breath becomes shallow. Maybe you're someone who struggles to look people in the eye, for instance, when you're talking, so you kind of don't feel confident enough, or you go red in the face or your palms sweat. That's more like a social anxiety sort of situation. Or perhaps when you kind of have this sinking feeling whenever you get like an email from a client or from your boss.
Yeah.
Sort of like it's almost like anxiety mixed with like imposter syndrome sometimes for people who just got maybe promoted, or they finally got the job they wanted and they just started working there, and every meeting feels like a torture. um, but then there is the different type of anxiety, which is more when people are like, yeah, I keep it all together, I'm as cool as a cucumber, but internally they're not. They're all of a sudden maybe they have this pain. Is that when sort of anxiety gets ignored on that level, I always find that then something happens with our body.
Yeah.
So it breaks down in some way, which then leads people to seek solution, or where they're like, oh, everyone thinks I'm kind of confident and I'm cool, but actually inside I constantly feel like I'm not enough.
Yeah.
And
That would be
and
hard.
that's where, yeah, and that's where people shut down sometimes, the ones who kind of have, especially that kind of, I call it a quiet anxiety. And they struggle to develop relationships
Yeah.
because they already feel like the work is so much demand, that just relationship is going to be like really difficult. Or sometimes
Or
that
even
anxiety, yeah, because it dysregulates our nervous is already dysregulated.
escalate and just make it
Yeah,
feel.
yeah, exactly. It just escalates. And then you kind of maybe shout at kids when you don't really mean to. And yes, you apologize later, but kind of like the damage is done a
Yeah,
little bit.
absolutely. And that,
Um,
like, work is important because we want to be like, proud of what it is that we do, but
mhm.
balancing all these different hats as such can get us down and out. So if someone came up to you at a dinner party and asked, so what do you really help people with? What would you
Mm.
tell them?
I think I would say a lot of the times what I help people with really is come back home to themselves. And I know it's sort of like it sounds a bit strange, but at the same time, I think a lot of the times when we live our life, and part of it when we feel anxiety, for example, is a sign as well of certain subconscious beliefs. That we kind of acquired throughout life, especially back in childhood, or maybe when we were a little bit older. Um, and they are the ones that are ruling our life, essentially. So you kind of almost don't have the freedom to make the choices that are true to yourself.
Yeah. Do you think that anxiety is perhaps a bit glorified these days because we constantly see it in social media? Oh, I've got anxiety. I've got anxiety. And there's a sense of pride in saying I've got anxiety. Do you feel that it has been glorified rather than gone, you know
Yeah,
what?
that's a very good point, actually. I do agree with you. I think it's been a little bit, by glorifying it, um, it's sort of almost made to feel like it's a norm, like it's a
Mm,
new norm.
yeah.
So I do find sometimes people who come to me for breath work, because I also do transformational breath work as well, which I found very helpful for people who have burnout, stuck in stress or anxiety again.
Mhm.
And when they come to me, it's almost like they're like, yeah, I kind of need to do my nervous system regulation, because like that's another thing that you hear all the time on social media these days. Everyone is using nervous system regulation.
Mhm.
Um, but they're like, oh, but I don't have anxiety. It's like it's just normal. Like, yeah, I'm stressed, but it's normal.
Mm.
But when I start asking, like, how's your sleep? Oh, I haven't slept well for like 10 years. That's a sign. So it's almost like, but stress is normal. That's like nobody in my position, in my work, can do this without stress. This is true. There's
Mhm.
definitely stress in the corporate world, in business world. When you have your own business, there's other stresses as well, but it doesn't mean that that's the norm,
Yeah,
right?
and it's about your reaction and how you're taking it in. Nobody is saying here that having anxiety is a bad thing, but there is a line between having anxiety and understanding when it's going to derail us and glorifying the anxiety like it's something that you're proud of. There is a line there.
Yeah.
And, anxiety is an emotion, but is it derailing you? That's the bigger
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. What exactly what impact does it do? Can it be maybe better without it in your life? I think that's another thing. And I do think there probably needs to be a bit more maybe communication around or empowerment. The fact that, like feeling overwhelmed
Yeah,
or feeling anxious, it doesn't have to be part of your life.
correct.
You actually can do things to change it.
Absolutely love that. Thank you for everybody for joining in on this chat with Natalia. I will put her information down in the description below. Please reach out. She's absolutely gorgeous, very down to earth, and very easy to talk to, in case you didn't get that already. All right, everybody, we'll catch you in the future. Bye-bye.
Bye.